but that the visual evidence you accumulated over months doesn't necessarily translate into the visual arguments you want to make. But you can't reshoot a unique event, especially one as extraordinary as a murder trial. And you certainly can't alter the ending. You can twist it and shape it, even spin it to some extent, but in the end you have to live with the result and its consequences just like everyone else. As in every other facet of life, you have zero control over the past. And it aches. As I jot down the time code for the start of the prosecution's opening statement, my eyes fall on the untouched container of chicken and broccoli from Lung Feng. Back at NYU, Professor Leary and I used to sit around the table in the editing room, eating Chinese takeout and discussing the types of films I aspired to make. While so many of his other students were intent on saving the world by taking on such weighty subjects as guns and global warming, I never shied away from the fact that my true passion was tabloid justice. Sensationalist coverage of criminal cases with a glaring spotlight on the human drama. Titillating an audience, not by expounding on minutiae like the penal code and rules of evidence, but by turning the camera on the players themselves, lifting the veil from their private lives, disseminating their deepest and darkest secrets, laying bare their hidden passions and fears. In other words, telling a story. The bloodier, the sexier, the better. Professor Leary didn't necessarily encourage this route, of course, but he said I had an eye, that if I applied my talent, I could be one of those precious few documentarians who make a living doing what they love. He even offered to mentor me after graduation, only he died in his sleep less than 3 months before I bounded up the stage to accept my degree. Incredibly, in his last will and testament, Professor Leary bequeathed to me a sum large enough to fund my first full-length documentary and then some. Having tossed the notion around for nearly a year, Brody and I finally decided to live in the islands until the perfect crime came along. Of course, never in my wildest dreams did I think the perfect crime would occur on Oahu. Never in my most unnerving nightmares did I believe that an act this savage, this callous, this tragic could transpire right here in paradise, let alone to someone I knew. 2. All good films open with an image, Professor Leary told me repeatedly. Following the initial fade, you have 4 or 5 minutes tops to seize your viewer's interest, so there's no time for fucking around with bland exposition or protracted dialogue. Open with an image, a visual that establishes a sense of place, of mood, of texture, a snapshot your audience has never seen before. Something unexpected, something unsettling. Start with the crime scene. On the night the weathergirl died, I'd forgotten to wear deodorant. Only registered that trivial fact when the dude drooping next to me at the bar commenced asking questions about my tattoos. I elevated my arm to give him an optimal view and was thumped in the face by a blend of Dove soap and body odor, that pungent and distinctive funk that only seems to accompany nights you're sporting your sexiest tank top. Not sure whether he noticed, but then I cracked wise about it, prompting him to abruptly lift my left arm and deposit his nose in the center of my pit. Already 4 rum drinks in, I was still trying to calculate the appropriate level of outrage to display when my iPhone began buzzing in my back pocket. I excused myself and took the call outside. "Where are you?" Brody said, with an assertiveness that was rare for him. "Just down the street, to Big Kahuna and Kuhio. Why don't you come down for a drink?" "I'm in the Jeep." There was an urgency in his voice. "On my way up the mountain." "Tantalus? What the shit for?" "Remember that police scanner I supposedly wasted our money on?" "My money on." "Either way, the investment just paid off, big time." "How so?" His tone softened. "Riley, it's Piper." I only knew one Piper on the island. "Piper Kingsley? What about her?" 8, 9, maybe 10 seconds passed in silence. Then, "She's dead." As those 2 words sunk heavily